So welcome. As I propose, this is going to be a talk on interconnectivity, collective intelligence. I may touch on anti-fragility, but that's a lot to include. We'll see if we get there. The reason I wanted to talk about interconnectivity is because it's become a hot topic on in some podcasts, and especially Rebel Wisdom. I don't know how many of you know Rebel Wisdom, but it's a pretty well listened to podcast that's had people like Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke. Don't know if you all know these people, but they're part of this growing web of intellectuals that are really being listened to by a lot of people, but not in the kind of normal mainstream, but through social media and YouTube. And the amazing thing is they're incredibly intellectual and complex thinkers. People are really interested in what they're saying. And the amazing thing for me is that a lot of their work really helps conceptualize what circling is all about and surrendered leadership. But this was the first time that it felt like the topic of conversation came right into the heart of the practice. So I see interconnectivity as being one of the highest principles of the practice, or highest values. And the way I understand interconnectivity is there is an energy or a potential or a consciousness that's only available when groups of humans come together. So that the interconnection between us all right now is a potential that is only available when we agree to come together as a collective. And another way I like to describe it is if a connection's like between two of us. So if I was with Brian now and we were exploring what it was like to be connected, that's connection. But when we're together with 17 of us, if we put our attention on what it's like to be in multiple connections simultaneously, we're bringing our attention to interconnection. And my thesis is that this becoming conscious of interconnection creates a very potent kind of intelligence, or is a very rich form of consciousness. One way to say if interconnection describes the connection between all of us as a group, the collective intelligence is like what emerges from interconnection, especially if we can harness it and navigate interconnection and bring more consciousness to it. Then we get this emergent collective intelligence. And surrendered leadership, especially, is a practice that is really harnessing or attempting to make conscious interconnection. So before I go further on that, just want to say a little bit about the context of this talk. So I would like to share more about surrendered leadership and interconnection, collective intelligence. And then my hope is I can speak for maybe half an hour, 40 minutes on that. And then I want to invite you into a space of interconnection, conscious interconnection or collective intelligence. And what I want is to still explore interconnectivity, but instead of like having questions which might like encourage more abstraction, what I'd like from you guys is if you can feel into something that might be deeply personal about something I'm sharing, or something that you notice being in this collective now. And then we can explore it from the present moment to enrichen or to bring an embodied sense of what I'll be outlining in the beginning of the talk. So if you feel like there's like a really, really important question and you just really want clarification of anything I say, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll wait till we get to the exploring part of the call. The one thing I say is I don't know what kind of a flow I'll get into, so plan may change. I'll navigate that with you. Just want to start by inviting you to become more present to the interconnection that's already here. And just take a moment to really notice what it's like to be you, listening to this talk right now. Notice I feel a slight relief that I'm slowing down in my belly. Something about slowing down or becoming more aware of what's happening in our immediate experience. Very important to interconnection. You might be able to sense your highness or arrownness or crayness or bodiness. What's it like to be you? And at the same time, connected to this group. Can you feel a distinction or a difference if you put your attention more onto what you sense and see and feel in the group? What you sense and feel, and you just really allow yourself to feel and become aware of your I-ness. And then what happens if you allow your I-ness and the sense of the group to be in the same awareness? So I want to start by showing why I think interconnection is important or such a high value. There's something about being able to harness the intelligence of a group that can usually, if done well, can really disturb us in good ways. It's very easy to be in a normal mode of thinking and feeling, or having a normal mode of like who you really are and who other people are. And there's something about interconnection, when we become really conscious of what's happening between us, that it can interrupt or disrupt our normal ways of feeling and thinking, which can give us a chance to become more conscious of things that we're not normally conscious of. There's something that each person in this call right now, there's a potential you have for being present that no one else in this call has. And on another level, there's a way where our presence is also very connected. And there's something unifying or one about our experience of awareness. But there's also something unique. The way you're all showing up right now, when I really start to pay attention, is very different. But also the way you connect. So there's a unique way that you connect or navigate being with others that no one else in this call has in the same kind of way. And if we can harness those different ways we're present and connected, we start to get all kinds of different intelligence, different kinds of awareness. We start getting disrupted or interrupted in ways that is not so easy if you're on your own or just in one connection. Or if you're in a structure that's not really structured to enhance the interconnection. The structure that's got a pre-format or more distinct roles that makes it difficult for emergent potentials in the group. And I'll speak more about that. I've not said much about, just added in a load of new words without, I'm sure most of you know them. So there's something about collective intelligence that's, for me, like more than the sum of the parts. There's something greater we can create if we start to surrender or open to what's emergent between us, that's greater than if we set up an intention to like explore presence and connection and found the best ways to do that we planned beforehand. And then we would go through those practices and let's find out about how to be present and connected. Or even if we were exploring a particular topic or we're having a business meeting, there's something about that pre-planned format that doesn't allow for a deeper emergence. And doesn't allow for our unique qualities of being present and connected to come forward and to impact everyone else. And the amazing thing that can happen when we start to harness this collective intelligence is if Jane is showing up, she's actually impacting everyone in the room at the same time. And everyone in the room has got a moment of how they're going to respond to how they've been impacted. But I want to go to an example to start to make this a little clearer, at least in me. Talk about how this first started, is that we never came into We never came into this practice by thinking we were going to teach surrendered leadership. That was a completely emergent practice. We had no idea of it. We started with circling, which I see more as a practice of connection. So in circling, we're really exploring what it's like to be ourselves and what it's like for the other that we're with. If we're really present and we dare to show up, we dare to be real or honest, or we dare to be authentic, which is not an easy thing. In some ways, it's like, yeah, being authentic, how can we not be authentic? There's one way that we're always being who we are. But actually, what we're pointing to in the practice is we're not always aware of what is deeply happening in us. So in this moment, you might feel like you're being authentic, but then you didn't realize that on a deeper level, you were feeling an emotion that you weren't aware of, or you're in a kind of psychological pattern that you developed as a child that you didn't realize you're still inside of. So you might be being honest, but you might not actually being as deeply authentic as you realize. So in this practice, we dare to look at like what's really happening in us, and are we being as real as we think we are? Which I think you all know is an vulnerable question to ask. Like, is there parts of me that I'm not actually able to feel or show up with? Is there a way I'm actually hiding when I think I'm sharing who I am? Or are there potentials still in me that are dormant that just haven't been activated yet? And then there's this part of circling, which is not just being real, but being present. And this seems to be this like master capacity that meditation and therapy and coaching all use. It's this discovery that if we really pay attention to the felt sense or the immediacy of experience, that there's a richness or there's a reality that can start to open up to us if we become more able to stay with what's here. We start discovering that there's actually an inside to experience. And that inside will start to disclose or show us different potentials or different intelligences or different awarenesses of what life and who we really are. And then what we found with circling is it's this intention to what happens if we be really real together, which is already vulnerable, and then at the same time we be more present, which is also this difficult capacity that usually you only like utilize in difficult practices like meditation. It might not be difficult for you, but it's certainly difficult for me. I spent many hours with aching bones and like distracted thoughts, and like it's really not an easy practice. But then I found with circling that if we are present with each other while we attempt to be real or authentic, there's an alchemy that happens. And I think this alchemy happens for two reasons. I think the presence enhances our capacity to be real, and being real actually enhances our capacity to be present. So we get this exponential effect that the more we're being vulnerable and real, the more able we are to be present to our experience. The more we're able to be present to our experience, the more real and the more authentic we can be. And there's this like positive feedback loop. And I think everyone here has experienced that moment where you're looking in someone's eyes and all you're doing is looking into their eyes, and suddenly you're like having this altered state of consciousness and you feel like you've been smoking marijuana or something, and suddenly you can feel feelings and it feels like you can feel their feelings, and like all these kind of new capacities come online. This intuitive knowing comes online. So we were doing this practice, but the thing that we always had was a sense of, if we discover something that feels deeply true while being in this like present connection with others, we're going to trust that and really try and embody that in our lives and follow it. Like if this is a more authentic, real experience that we discover in practice, then we're going to want to align our lives to what we discover. We don't want to go back to like, okay, now I'm back in normal mode, and like that was practice and this is life. It's like, no, if this is practice is showing us deeper levels of what's here, let's follow that. So then we ended up leading workshops in circling, which we never planned. We just did circling so much that people started to recognize what we did, and we got invited to do events. But after a while doing circling, something happened where we would do circles, which are these small group practices, and then we would invite everyone back into to like be as a big group. And then we would say like, oh, does anyone have any questions about the circles you've been in? Does anyone want to like share or ask questions about what happened? And there was something about doing that didn't seem quite right. It was like, here we were in this practice where we were really exploring what it was like to be authentic and to be present together. And then we would like call everyone in, and then we would have this kind of question and answer kind of thing, where we were the ones who knew how to answer the questions, and everyone was just like sharing their experiences, but their experiences of what happened 20 minutes before. And then there's this energy of like, everyone, do we have to listen to what people say all the time? And not everyone says things that's that interesting. And so there's a whole thing going on that we could sense, but we were like just so used to that format inside a workshop. So then we just started to say to each other like, well, what happens if we were really like in the practice still when the group comes in? So then we challenged each other to do that. And then obviously what would happen, everyone would come in and we didn't actually have an authentic question to ask them, or we didn't really want to ask them what did they experience 10 minutes ago. We started to go into a deep silence. And suddenly we could feel a potency in the group that we didn't normally feel. It was like, oh, if we really wait, and if we feel that sense of like, we don't know what we're going to say, we're actually going to wait for something that's deeply honest. It was like, suddenly it was like there was an aliveness that was like, oh my God. But it was also like, oh, can we stay in this? Like, aren't people going to get pissed off with us? Like, they've paid to come and do this practice, and now we're just sat here doing, not saying anything. But it was obvious that was also part of a patterning inside of us, a kind of expectation to show up a certain way. And then when we like went deeper to the authenticity, we wouldn't say something until we're ready. And then all this kind of stuff started to happen, not only this presence in the room, but actually people started to be real in a way where they weren't trying to be real. So some people might be complaining like, what the hell are you guys doing? Or others would be like, no, I don't know what they're doing, but this feels amazing. What's going on? I can't, it's like, there's amazing presence here. And then someone else would be like, I can't feel that. What's wrong with me? And someone would be vulnerable, and then someone else would come in and be like, oh, I can feel you, like what's happening? And then suddenly there would be a connection, and we were suddenly exploring all these deep themes around connection and leadership and what it meant to be in the group. And there was an excitement that was actually even more potent than these smaller birthday circles we were doing, these smaller explorations in small groups. So then slowly but surely we dared to do that more and more. And then I think within a year, all of our trainings had been transformed from most of the time we spent in a big group. And then occasionally we did these small groups just to practice some of the capacities that were important to being in the big group. And it was after being in that for a while that I started to like, what is this thing that happens when we we let go of our normal way of leading and we start to listen as leaders to what's emergent in the group or what's really present, and start to show up from our truest authenticity. It wasn't not leading. It wasn't like, oh, let's just sit here and see what goes. It was like, no, what's our most truest leadership? Like, what are the things we really want to say? What's deeply meaningful for us? But also, can we be more impacted and more awake to what's happening in the group? And that's where things started to get a little bit crazy and meaningful and deep and difficult. I think all of you that I know here have had experiences of what happens in the group when a leader is willing to share their context, willing to share their truth of what the practice is, but then goes into a deep listening with the group and is willing to show up authentically with the group and encourage this interconnective exploration, this willingness to be in the collective intelligence. It's like everyone in the group, as soon as the leader is willing to let go like that or surrender in, automatically everyone has leadership choices to make. Like if no one's giving a direction from a pre-planned thing, if it's like we're going to explore what's here and allow what's between us to guide us, then everyone suddenly has this choice, like, should I show up and contribute? Should I just be quiet and find out what's happening more clearly in myself and not put it out on the group? Should I share what struggles I'm having? Should I show more of myself in my embodiment, not just my words and my thinking? Can I embody more of who I am while I'm with this group? Should we stay as a big group, or should we split off into small groups or more spontaneous things that can emerge? And it's those decisions that I think help reveal deeper parts of us. And I'm sure you've had the experience where you're in a group and you think it's going well, and you're like present and you can feel what's going on, you feel connected, and then suddenly someone shows up in a way that's like, it like hits you so hard. And it might be because they show up in a way that you've not shown up in before, and suddenly you feel shame or you feel love, and then you're surprised at feeling love, and then you notice yourself suppress it, and like things can just happen so fast. And then suddenly you're in this dilemma, like, as I so often was, like that thing of like someone showing a new potential, especially in the beginning, I would be like, oh, I'm supposed to be the leader. I'm supposed to be able to feel that potential as well, but I can't, or I've never been where they are. And surely as a leader, I should be able to go everywhere everyone goes. So then I was straight away putting self-pressure on myself, going straight into shame, but it would happen so fast I wouldn't realize. I would be just straight away into the shame, and I wasn't able to own that experience and be like, yeah, I'm not feeling okay as a leader. So it took me a while to be able to notice where I was getting triggered into shame, and then to notice that actually it was my self-image of what it was to be a leader that was being touched, and that people were actually giving me chances to feel parts of myself that I couldn't feel as strong as they could at that time. And there were other emergent potentials that started to happen as well, where we would start to have these spontaneous constellations where suddenly, like, what was happening in my life, the big ethical dilemmas in my life or in other people's, was suddenly like very real and potent in the group. These impossible problems that people would find themselves in with conflict with 3 or 4 other people at the same time, and then the group's trying to resolve it but making it worse with everything they say, and then suddenly it's like the whole group's enmeshed in this chaotic web of dynamics and triggers, and like people trying to take control, people withdrawing, and it's like, surely this is going to be the end of this. Like, there's no way anyone's going to be happy about being in this practice when we're just in this chaos. And then suddenly, bit by bit, someone shows a bit more vulnerability. Someone brings a perspective where someone feels deeply seen, and then they relax. And then someone else suddenly can embody an emotion or an experience that resonates with others. And suddenly there's this deep connection starts to emerge out of the chaos. And there's something about interconnectivity that will take us to further edges of chaos and uncertainty and unknown, that will then take us to deeper levels of integration and senses of connection or group communion that we don't normally have access to. So my sense is this would be a good moment to open it up a little more. I just want to invite you to see if there are any questions, or especially like for yourself, like things you've experienced with interconnectivity that maybe you struggle with or you would like to know more about. But at the same time, becoming more aware of the group and our interconnectivity. Maybe sharing something about what you're experiencing.
Something comes up that I'm exploring at the moment. And it has to do with that I
if
noticed.
You're speaking, Christian, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear Christian.
Yeah, I can hear you too, Christian.
I'm not sure, Sean, if it's something on your side.
Sean, can you hear anyone? I don't think he can hear.
I can't hear you either, Kigani. Ah.
Can you hear me now?
So I can't hear anyone. Thought you guys were quiet. Now I got it. Yeah, my sound was.
Oh, can you hear me now?
The beauty of interconnectivity.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, Christian. Yeah.
The best way I can describe it is that I experience the group I'm in as a body with all these different organs and bones and muscles, and so the group is one body system in itself, and every, let's say, organ has its specific function. And what I mean with this is that what I experience myself in being in a group, that I'm picking up something from what is in the group itself, which feels more to be more than something only related to me personally. And that brings me in a situation that I'm at times insecure and wondering if is this what I'm feeling? Is this me, or is this something else? And I'm getting confused. Maybe you can say something about that that helps me clarify.
Well, what you say is beautiful to me. It's like the right kind of question. So if we start to come into a group and we want to harness the interconnectivity, then some of the questions we're going to start to come up against is like, you're being deeply present. Like, is what I'm feeling an indication of like how I'm being impacted by the group? Is it something I'm picking up from the group that I can give as a reflection to bring more awareness to the group? Or is the group making me aware of things that I'm not normally aware of? And like now I've got, like, there's a vulnerable chance for me to integrate a part of myself I'm not used to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm finding myself in a fog, how to navigate that, and not clear how to work with that. Or
Do you have that experience right now with this group?
yes, actually I do, because the moment I got into the call, a huge pain in my chest started to arise. And this touched on what I've just explored and what you beautifully phrased and summarized. Is this something that I'm picking up from the group, or is this something that the group is do I experience the impact of the group, and is this something that is going on in myself on a deeper layer, and to use this opportunity to really meet that on a deeper layer?
And the feeling in your chest, is that still present, like,
Yeah.
as you're speaking?
Yes, very much.
So there's something that happens in me when I hear you. Actually, I start to soften, knowing that you're experiencing something seems on a deeper felt level in you, and I don't know what it means. But I notice I soften hearing that that's there.
Mm.
And I think to answer your question is like what's happening right now feels like one way to answer. Like when you're in a group and you start feeling these deeper things, it's like, yeah, not feeling a pressure to know what it is already something that's, I think that's what I was offering you and being aware of it with you. And then you get to just share the deeper experience, and then we don't know, like, but I'm sure everyone in this group now also had some kind of impact from you sharing. And that impact might be like nothing.
Mm.
But if someone's speaking in a group and you feel nothing, that's actually quite an important information.
Mm.
And like, again, we don't know if that says something about the speaker or the listener or neither, but so yeah.
In what sense is it? In what sense is it important information?
Well, if someone doesn't feel impacted when you speak on an emotional or felt level, something must be happening somewhere. because usually when people share something that's deeply personal, it will have an impact. But that can't always like be a rule, but it certainly gets my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be vulnerable for both sides. Like if people can't feel me when I'm speaking, and then it can be vulnerable for me, but it can also be vulnerable if you're with a group or with someone and they're speaking and you can't feel them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that me? Is that because they're not really connected to their truth right now? Like, is it? We don't know. At least in this moment, I don't know. I wonder if there is anyone in the group that did have an impact hearing you.
I started to get this sense like I really need to be away from here. Like I really need to just leave. It's very tense in my chest and in my belly.
And was that directly related to Christian, or he shared, or what you were already feeling?
It started around the time that Christian shared this thing, or really it started at the time that you said that you asked if anybody has something to share or to bring the attention back to the group.
And I'm obviously being a little bit more like active or directive than I would be considering the context of the talk, but this already becomes like interesting. So like Christian sharing this thing in his chest, and he doesn't know if it's about him or the group. And yet when he speaks, it seems like Brian's impacted in his chest as well, and then gets a sense of like wanting to run away when he feels that. Is that Brian's like intuitive sensitivity that's like revealing something about Christian, or is Christian's sensitivity giving Brian access to a part of himself that he doesn't normally feel? Both. Or neither. And at the same time, there's still 15 other people also having an experience, not just of what they're saying, but also what I'm saying.
Yeah, Sean, I also feel curious about like experiences of like boredom or disengagement or disconnection. Sometimes I get the feeling in the context of circling, these are almost like bad experiences to have, or that when they come up, they get questioned very thoroughly. I think I feel some curiosity around that.
Yeah. And is it something you experience now, or just like something that you can relate to now we're in a more collective field?
Yeah, awareness of some.
By the way, come to that.
Yeah, just awareness of some sense of a bit of mental fog and sort of leaning back a bit, some discontent, and then equality just kind of, yeah, a bit of just disengaging, not quite being fully present. Something about not getting what I'm wanting, maybe.
So I want to weave this to two things, because there was something in my talk that I couldn't quite name, and Craig's question helps me. It's like a deeper, like, why would we bother? Like, what's the intention? So in surrendered leadership circles, we're often training leaders to be able to recognize and be able to lead themselves in a kind of interconnection space, or collective, to be able to harness a collective intelligence in their leadership. But we're also doing it like for personal development. So that's one context which you can do this practice in. And so from your share now, what becomes interesting is like, if we look at it from a personal development point of view, So here you are in a group, and there's intention to explore what's present. And then what happens in you is you start to feel disengaged, and maybe you're not getting what you need. And it might be because maybe the context isn't the right place for you to get what you need, or this group. But then it also might be that, oh yeah, when you're in a group and we can like put the spotlight on like what's happening on a deeper level, is something being touched in you? Is there some need that you don't normally get access to, or is not so clear to access, that suddenly is like a bit louder, and because there's no like obvious structure to like know what's going to happen next, and you have to come forward yourself, it's like suddenly this need is like calling you on a different level than normal. I wonder if that speaks to anything.
Not immediately. It almost feels like there's something in me that like wants to play and not to sit and listen. Is I'm realizing what's happening. There's something more energetic and like playful that wants to come up. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's something about the context of the talk that, you know, it's a part of you that doesn't want to just always listen. So there's something also that we don't need to do a surrender leadership circle in service of personal development, or to teach leaders to be able to lead the process. We're often using it in business and to make important decisions, but also in my relationships. And there's something about, if we've got an important business decision to make, and say in that business decision, what's happening on a relational level is when I speak, David feels like he doesn't want to listen. If that was happening in a business meeting, normally the context would be, no, let's stay focused on the content. We've got to make this decision. And to talk about the relationship would be a distraction. But what we continually find is, if there's a decision we can make to explore, like, oh, so if every time we try and make this decision, something happens between me and David or me and Renee that's actually louder than the content, it seems like we keep bumping into each other in a way we don't understand, but then the other people around us are like, you guys always do this. What's happening right now? And then suddenly we see that, like, actually David on a deeper level wants to show something of himself more in this business, and for some reason that's like hidden at the moment, or is too vulnerable to bring forward, but actually might be very important to the business decision we're making. Or there's a way that I'm showing up that's actually very difficult, makes it difficult for others to show up in, or there's a way that like I'm like threatened on a deeper level by others showing up, and that's the thing that needs to be seen. And by exploring these like subtle things that are happening in the immediacy, like when we feel it, I think you've all been in that like family meeting or business meeting or something where it's like you're trying to get to a decision, and it's like there's some elephant in the room, or there's some annoyance you've got, or there's some way you feel like, you know, there's not really enough space to really explore what's really happening, what really matters, but there's no way to really do anything about it. It's like a very difficult environment to just say, like, hang on a second, what are people really feeling right now? Because something doesn't seem right to me. So what we're doing with surrendered leadership is we're actually setting the context that not only can we bring these things forward, but actually the immediacy is probably going to bring us more wisdom about the thing we're trying to solve anyway. it's probably going to surprise us and bring in more collective intelligence to a problem than the normal kind of leader-follower role that we've been also navigating a bit in this talk. But the thing we've also found is the practice is very interesting, because especially for people who are very committed to personal development, is that you could be doing a business deal and someone could be bringing awareness to a relationship dynamic or something that's happening in the present moment that actually does feel like a distraction from the decision. It does feel like they're like smuggling in their like need for attention in a time where actually the important thing is actually that we use the time wisely on the things we've got to decide. But then it's like navigating that also becomes like, that becomes the opportunity for the others in the meeting to stand up and be like, hang on a second, I know it's important to be aware of what's going on a deeper level, but on a deeper level, what I feel like is I want to stay focused on this. And I think what you want to go into is something you can handle afterwards. So surrender leadership isn't an invitation to always be in process. To always be looking at what's going on a deeper level necessarily. It's a deep engagement with immediacy and being willing to show up. And showing up could be to set more structure, but showing up could also be to say, I don't think we can make a decision till we really find out what's going on.
John, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I totally can see like how powerful and amazing this would be. Let's say in business, when all your meeting people are all circling people. But how does it work when, like, let's say most of the people are not circling people and they don't have these being with the other and the trusting experience, like they don't have this foundation to bring, like my mind right away goes to, wow, I don't know if they would even like have the desire to be honest, like that fear of being truthful and all that comes up, that is developed by part of the practice. So I look at my business dealings and I think, wow, how would that even be introduced? Like, how would you even bring that to the table in a way that would work?
Well, I really want to answer that question, and I just want to acknowledge that we're at the hour.
Okay.
I actually I've given myself space so I can keep going, but for anyone that needs to go, I just want to thank you for being here, and you're all very welcome to stay on a little longer. I'm just going to keep riffing if there are people that want to stay on. So, yeah. This question's like gets right to the heart of the practice for me. So I think for us guys who are deeply immersed in the practice and already feel a buy-in to these kind of principles, there's something about surrender which is always available. Otherwise, it's not surrender. The difficulty that can happen is when we're in spaces together where everyone's like agreeing to play. Like we come together and we're like, come on, let's get the gloves off and let's play. And that's a metaphor in anyone who knows martial arts, that if you want to spar for real, if you want to practice for real, you take your gloves off and then you really get busy. And there's something about in surrender leadership spaces, we're often like that. And there is a potential that gets created in that, which is amazing. And then after we've been with each other for 3 or 4 days or 2 days, even a day, even an hour, it's like, oh yeah, like altered states of consciousness, new realizations, everything's clear. Like, but we actually also forget that actually on the first morning we arrived in the surrendered leadership circle, it wasn't actually plain sailing. We were like struggling quite a lot, and there were moments where we were like not enjoying it. And that's in a space where we're intentionally doing it. But there's something where we got to like that experience of the heightened state is so important for deepening in the practice, but it's so different to showing up in a business meeting where there isn't a context. But the principle's still the same. If I show up in my surrender, actually, I don't start shaming everyone for not being deeper. Or I don't start saying like, oh, this is a load of bullshit if we're not being more honest. If that's not actually the truest feeling. Often the truest feeling for me in that kind of setting is actually, oh man, I'm so scared to be vulnerable here. That's actually more true than anything. Like, oh, I'm actually deeply scared. Or actually, I actually don't feel an impulse to do anything. And maybe that's an intelligence that's telling me it's not the right time. Maybe that's I'm not ready. But actually, the truth is, I think I want it deeper, but there isn't actually any deeper impulse to do anything. So if we're deeply in the practice, I often find in these environments, especially I've had it with my family and yeah, like other business settings, if I'm really in the practice, it actually goes a lot slower naturally, but actually the transformations become profound over a longer period and like surprising. But there's another thing. I heard in one of these talks on Rebel Wisdom, someone asked for the link. I don't have it, you just have to Google it. But one person said something that I really liked, and it's like, when there's this emergent kind of practice, like anything, you actually have to get your like Olympic level athletes trained up that can consistently reproduce the kind of capacities that this practice creates, that can consistently in different and more pressured environments show what it is, and can like start to galvanize people into that kind of awareness. So there is actually a reality that I, like 10 years into practice, there are things I can do in environments now that I couldn't do 5 years ago or 1 year ago, or definitely not 10 years ago, definitely not. And then in 20 years time of practice, if I'm still going, like there'll probably be even more enhanced capacities to impact people on a larger scale. So there's, or in more difficult settings. So there is a thing of, we've got to keep developing, and probably a lot more than what a lot of the environments we're in are going to be willing to do. But every time we improve or practice more deeply, it's going to have a ripple effect. And then we'll get more skillful at introducing people and slowly bringing them in and really being with them sincerely in surrender. So yeah, that was a lot of.
Yeah, is it kind of like you're always in your practice? So even if you're in an environment where it's not stated surrender leadership and it's not stated that they're circling, because you're sort of always in your practice, you just bring that to the happening. And exactly. So it's okay. So it's not like always there's these business meetings where everyone's like, we're going to do this practice now. It's more like whoever you are, you bring to the moment. And then that encourages the energy to be more circling like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes with practice. So yeah, if it's real for you to actually say to a group of people that matter to you, maybe business or friends, look, I've got this practice that I'm still learning and it really helps me, and I imagine it can help us. Can I just try some of these simple practices with you? And very little pressure, just just the beginning. That may be the best way. But there's also this thing, a friend that I had recently, he's actually a business friend who did some work with us. He reflected to me, it's like, when he was hanging out with me for a while, he was like, the thing that's so cool about circling, where someone suddenly asks the right question or reveals the vulnerable thing, when I'm with you, that happens more often and in all sorts of places than I'm used to. And I didn't know, I wasn't trying to do that, but obviously from a lot of practice, it just becomes more of a thing that, yeah, that you can seize more opportunities. But I'm sure there's still plenty that, yeah, to still, there are times where I don't see what's there quick enough to.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Thank you so much.
Cool. Is there one more question, and then, or a share or feedback of the content?
I know I just asked a question, but I have another angle on something that was said earlier I'd love to share. Just personally, like, I've been noticing sometimes when I'm in circling, I don't, like, most of the times I do feel a lot of impact, and there is a lot of, energy going through me and things are happening, but sometimes I don't feel, I'm sort of more blank. And for me personally, I've been trying to see that as like being really okay. Like sometimes there is no resonance, and that is appropriate, and that, like, almost like the energy is flowing through me, and it isn't sticking or connecting, and that, like, I'm trying to look at it like I don't have to search for why I'm not connected, or I don't have to search for like what's wrong with the fact I'm not feeling anything. I'm trying to use this practice to actually also accept the non-feeling as good too, like neutral too, or okay also. And I just wanted to share that because I was listening to what everyone was saying earlier, and I feel like I didn't hear that point of view yet. So I just wanted to throw that out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that it's enjoyable to hear for me, because there's so much that can happen. It's something that's quite common, I think, humans being together, but it's common in surrendered leadership that someone feels bored. And actually what you're saying is something that really resonates, that someone actually said to me once, and it was kind of something someone said that transformed something in me. It's that boredom is an incredible experience when you're a yes to it. And then it's suddenly like, actually, what could be happening is I'm actually totally okay. Others in the room aren't okay. And actually, that's actually okay. But because maybe we're not used to that, then we start like thinking that, oh no, that I should be more involved. And then there's a self-pressure. And that's actually what's being expressed, not actually boredom. But then there's equally, like, I'm sure as a leader, someone shared boredom, and I've also like took it personally and then reacted and like told them to go deeper when really I was triggered. And so there's also lots of fun to be had with it on all sides. But yeah, boredom is, I think, a doorway to something very peaceful. And sometimes it's someone's soul wanting to come out and impact the group and create a deeper direction. I just want to say one more cool thing, or it's cool for me at least. There's something about group dynamics that I find very useful to navigate. And something that Ken Wilber talks about, that reality is always, can be seen as always like constructed in holons. And a holon is something that's a whole and it's a part. So right now, I'm a part of this group. There's 17 of us, so I'm only part of it. I'm not the whole group. But I'm also a whole Sean. Like I'm a whole human being within this collective, which I'm a part of. And if you look at everything in reality, you can see that it always has a level of whole and part. So like our body is like, you know, organs are part of the body, but they are also a whole on themselves. Like the liver can be a whole on its own, but it's part of the body. And that goes to all levels. And there's something about the balance between wholes and parts that's always going on. So for a whole to be happy, it's usually got to feel coherence. So like if my body suddenly gets an injury, it's like part of it's hurt, there's not a coherence in my body, so then I'll start to feel disrupted. And I think that happens in the group. Like if parts of the group aren't satisfied or bored or feel like they don't belong or want to take over, then the whole loses coherence. And when it loses coherence, then there's lots of. But then when the group suddenly finds that everyone finds a place and they find their voice and they feel connected and there's a shared narrative that is deeply meaningful, then there's this sudden, like everyone's like, ah, and there's this deep, meaningful space. So there's a coherence on the whole. And what we just keep finding from interconnectivity and collective intelligence is it's enhanced when actually all the individuals in the group actually show up in their uniqueness. So when people find their unique impact in the moment, which might be, I just feel quiet and receptive, or another person feels like they want to dance. Another person wants to philosophize like something that's really meaningful for them. Another person is wanting to inquire and be with someone else and feels a deep empathy. But it's like when everyone starts to find their real unique expression, but at the same time don't want to control the whole. So they're willing to be who they are uniquely, but they're not trying to direct everyone else or control what other people are experiencing or make it wrong or want something better from. There's a willingness to really be impacted and part of the group, but to show up uniquely. That's when the interconnectivity starts to get exhilarating. And the amazing thing about that is then it's like, if that's true and that is like the thing that enhances our collective intelligence the most, the collective intelligence is telling us that it wants us to be deeply who we are, but it wants us to be humble and impactable and in connection with others and not try to control what's happening on that level. And you can always see it when someone says in the group, like with our example we've been using, I'm bored, I don't know what you guys are doing. Like what I've just done is I've not owned or revealed something that's deeply happening in me that I'm like, this is my truth. I've actually said that because of what you're doing, I'm having this thing that I don't want to be happening to me. So not only have I not accepted my partners, I've also made you the problem for creating what I don't want to feel. Whereas if I then look closely and I see like, oh, I feel okay and like I don't need to do anything, or I feel like I need something and I don't know how to name it. And it's like I want to push you away, but I want to be accepted at the same time. And just show that as it is. Then it gives the collective a chance to then reflect and give different responses that can both enhance my awareness, but also the awareness of the group. And it does seem that collective intelligence loves to just see people's in the moment raw experience and just allow it, like when it's fully allowed to be as it is, it seems to deeply inspire. I think that's because it enhances the self-awareness, but also enhances the embodiment of the moment. So I'll leave it there. Now, thank you all. Yeah, thank you for participating, being here.
Thank you, Sean.
Big love.
Yeah. Bye.